I almost turned back at the door. The Precision Club has a way of reminding outsiders they don't belong: polished walnut counters, cigars clinging to the air, and men who measure themselves in scores and scars. Derek Hale stood in the middle, laughing loud enough to own the room. When his eyes landed on me, his grin sharpened. "Didn't think you'd actually show, Claire," he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "Last time you held a rifle, wasn't it at that carnival booth? What did you win, stuffed panda?" Laughter rippled around him. He flicked a number into the air like a dealer shuffling chips. 15 grand. 50 yards. Hit the bull or forfeit. His tone dripped with mock generosity. I should have walked away. Everyone expected me to, because people like me don't take that kind of shot. Not a single tournament under my belt, no military badge, no hunting lodge membership. Just a woman who kept quiet after burying her father and swore she'd stay out of this world. But promises have teeth. And his cruelty had lit the fuse. "I'll take it," I said. My voice cut sharper than I felt. He smirked, leaning closer. "Hope you brought that panda for luck." The rifle felt heavier than memory, but my pulse knew the rhythm. When the trigger broke, silence filled the hall like glass about to shatter. The target would decide everything. When I first moved into Silver Point Estates, I thought I'd left that other life behind. The brochures promised quiet cul-de-sacs, weekend farmers markets, and neighbors who nodded without prying. My father, Samuel Ward, had been the one who taught me how to hold a rifle steady between sobs and laughter, not for trophies or glory, but to teach kids in our town how a firearm could be handled with respect. He ran the little safety program out of a battered community hall and never wanted the spotlight. After he died, I promised myself I wouldn't touch a gun again. I wanted the memory to stay a memory, not a tool for other people's entertainment. The Precision Club wasn't just a shooting range, it was the neighborhood's shrine to wealth and status. Derek Hale, who wasn't just HOA president, he was also the reigning champion at the Precision Club, the man whose plaques and trophies filled the lobby, had built that place into his courtroom. He judged, rewarded, and humiliated with the same practiced smile. I hadn't planned on ever setting foot there. But the HOA had turned the club's anniversary gala into a neighborhood spectacle, half social gathering, half performance. Everyone was expected to show up at least once to support the community. I told myself I was only going to make an appearance, shake a hand or two, and leave before the gun's smoke settled. That pass of my father's felt less like an invitation than an obligation, like Samuel himself was still on the list. People assumed the members were all wealthy hobbyists. They didn't know Samuel used to bring local kids to the public range to teach them patience. The Precision Club had given him an honorary pass years back, and after he died, I kept it like a relic. That's how I walked through those doors in plain jeans, a thrift jacket, and a scar of grief I hid behind measured silence. Derek remembered me too well, as the kid chasing brass casings while my father trained men who became legends. To him, I'd always be the girl who didn't belong. He has a way of making his barbs sound like a public service announcement. "Claire," he called across the brass and walnut, loud enough for the whole lounge to turn, "the last time I saw you with a rifle, you were winning a stuffed bear at a county fair. You really think you're ready to play with the grown-ups tonight?" His friends laughed. Someone clapped. The words landed like stones. I forced a smile because arguing with a man in his element only makes a spectacle out of you. Inside, my jaw tightened. Samuel's face flickered in the rush of anger and grief. The afternoons he'd sat beside me at a cheap folding table, showing me how to breathe, how to hold a pause. Nobody in that room knew that. To them I was an amusing story. To me, I was the daughter of a man who had taught other people to be steady when the world wasn't. I should have left after the joke. I should have let the humiliation sit where it belonged. But when he said it so publicly, so casually, something in me that had been quiet since Sam's funeral unclenched. It wasn't pride that kept me there. It was a promise and a choice, not to vanish into other people's assumptions. When Derek laughed that night, he didn't realize he'd struck the very thing he'd tried to bury. The fuse had been lit. I didn't walk into that room planning to pick a fight. But humiliation has a way of rewriting your plans for you. Derek knew it. I knew it. And now everyone else was waiting for me to either back down or make a fool of myself. So when he leaned back in his leather chair, grinning like a man who already owned the ending, I opened my mouth before common sense could stop me. Fine. Let's make it interesting. The room shifted. Glasses paused midair. Derek raised his brows, savoring the tension like a man swirling vintage whiskey. "What's your wager, Claire?" he asked. "Another stuffed bear?" I didn't flinch. 4,000. Straight shot. Best grouping takes it. It wasn't just a number. It was everything I had left in my savings account. Rent. Groceries. The fragile buffer between me and a zero-balance text message. My chest tightened as I said it, but the words were already loose in the air. Derek's friends whistled, some clapping, others chuckling like they were front row at a comedy show. 4,000 to them was pocket change. To me, it was months of scraping. He didn't answer right away. He liked to make people wait. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the polished walnut table, and said, "Accepted." That's when the trap began to close. Because Derek never played fair. His friends weren't just friends, they were his audience, his hype men, his enforcers. I could already see them shifting around, not in obvious ways, but subtle ones, just enough to make me wonder where the game really started. If I walked now, I'd be the coward he painted me as. If I stayed, I'd be stepping into his arena, against a man who had the money, the crowd, and the club itself in his pocket. And yet, instead of shaking with rage, I felt myself settle. My anger didn't run wild, it focused, sharp as a scope locking onto its mark. Derek wasn't just underestimating me. He was depending on it. That's the flaw in a rigged game. When they're certain you've already lost, they never bother to guard against the upset. The rifle felt heavier than I remembered, though I knew it was just the weight of eyes. Every set of them, Derek's smug grin, his friend's smirks, the manager's polite mask, rested squarely on me. The Precision Club didn't care if I hit the target. They wanted a show. They wanted to see me crack. I laid the stock against my shoulder, and for a moment, I wasn't in Silver Point anymore. I was 12 again, perched on a folding chair beside my father at the public range. His voice came back, quiet, steady. "Breath is half the shot, Claire. Don't fight it, follow it." Derek's voice cut through, mocking. "Careful. Wouldn't want you to bruise your shoulder. They say recoil's a little harsher than winning a teddy bear." Laughter rippled behind him. I didn't answer. I let the noise wash over me, let the weight of grief and humiliation funnel into the stillness I remembered. I breathed in, slow, let it out. My finger curled against the trigger, steady as the memory that guided it. The shot cracked like thunder, echoing through the chamber. For half a second, silence followed, everyone holding their breath, waiting to see if Derek's joke had teeth. The target reeled back on its line, gliding toward us. When the paper stopped swaying, the room went quiet, no laughter, no applause, just a sharp intake of air. The bullet hadn't split the bullseye, but it kissed the red so close you'd have to measure with a ruler to tell the difference. It wasn't perfection, but it was close enough to shift the air, close enough that Derek's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat before he forced it back. And in that silence, everyone realized the same thing. Maybe the game wasn't entirely Derek's anymore. Derek's smile didn't falter, but his eyes burned. A near bullseye from me, in his club, was something he couldn't let stand. He clapped once, sharp, like calling order in a courtroom. "Not bad," he said, his voice smooth enough to glide across the walnut panels, but pitched just high enough for everyone to hear. "But one shot doesn't make a shooter. Precision isn't luck, Claire. Precision is discipline, and discipline is proven over time." The room chuckled in agreement. Derek had turned the crowd back to him. He leaned forward, resting his hand on the polished counter. "So here's my offer. 1 week from tonight, a formal match. You and me. Not a parlor trick, not beginner's luck, a real test. Winner takes $15,000. The figure landed like a slap. For Derek, it was spare change, another way to flaunt his power. For me, it was impossible money, money I didn't have. If I refused, I'd look like a coward. If I lost, I'd go broke. Either way, Derek thought he'd cornered me. Of course, he added with a smirk, I hear you don't have much of a competitive background. Unless, of course, we're counting the carnival games. His friends laughed again, the echo bouncing off the brass and walnut. Don't worry, I'll even let you use one of our rifles. Wouldn't want nostalgia to hold you back. The humiliation stung sharper than the mockery. He wasn't just questioning my aim, he was dragging my father's memory down to the level of cheap entertainment. That night, I left the Precision Club with my jaw tight and my fists aching from being clenched too long. The next day, Ryan showed up at my door. My childhood friend. My father's best student. He'd heard about the match before I'd even caught my breath, and he wasn't there to ask, he was there to train me. We met at the old public range, the same one where my father used to run his weekend programs. It was nothing like the Precision Club, concrete dividers, worn targets, the faint smell of oil and dust. At first, the rifle felt alien again, the kick rough, my aim sliding wide. Each miss echoed Derek's laughter in my head. But Ryan was patient. Your father didn't teach you to chase the bullseye, he reminded me, adjusting my stance. He taught you to breathe. Everything else follows. Little by little, the rhythm came back, the pause, the breath, the squeeze instead of the pull. My shots crept closer, steadier, more deliberate. Still, I knew Derek wouldn't come alone to that match. He had the entire club behind him, and even the event coordinator, who had always played neutral, was already being cornered by Derek's charm and pressure. I could see it in the way the man's emails arrived too quickly, too polished, too rehearsed. This wasn't just going to be about who could shoot straighter. It was about who could stand when everything around them bent to Derek's will. And as I tightened my grip on the worn stock of that practice rifle, one truth burned through me, I couldn't walk away. If I lost, it wouldn't just cost me $15,000. It would bury my father's name under Derek's smirk and bury me right beside it. The week that followed became a blur of recoil and breath. Every morning, Ryan met me at the old public range, and every evening I fell asleep with the ghost of my father's voice in my head. My shoulders bruised, my hands blistered, but slowly the rifle no longer felt foreign. It felt like mine again. The first time I strung together 3 clean shots in a row, Ryan lowered his own rifle and just shook his head, grinning. He's underestimating you. He thinks you're walking into his court unarmed. And that's your biggest weapon. His words lit something steady in me. I wasn't just keeping pace anymore, I was finding rhythm. By midweek, we took practice inside the Precision Club itself. Ryan said if I was going to face Derek there, I had to be comfortable on his turf. Walking through those brass-trimmed doors again was like stepping into enemy territory. But the stares I got this time weren't all mocking. Some were cautious, curious. Whispers fluttered around the lounge like startled birds. Did you see her train? Someone muttered. Beginner's luck doesn't last that long, another said. Derek wasn't there that day, but his friends were. I saw the flicker in their eyes, the tiniest crack in their certainty. For the first time, it felt like the room wasn't entirely his. For a moment, momentum was mine. My confidence built with each shot, and even the event coordinator, who'd been avoiding eye contact, started watching me a little longer than he should have. Ryan clapped me on the shoulder as we left. Hale won't know what hit him. I wanted to believe that. I almost did. Because Derek wasn't just planning to outshoot me, he was planning to break me. Tampering had been his warm-up. This time, he was reaching further, pulling strings outside the range, setting traps where I couldn't see them. And men like him never play fair when their pride's on the line. The morning of the competition had the club transformed. What was usually a quiet, reserved space now thrummed with tension. Rows of pristine chairs lined the green, velvet ropes sectioning off areas for the VIPs. The wealthy patrons, bankers, lawyers, donors in pressed suits, had come not just to watch a match but a spectacle. Derek had made sure of that. He had whispered to anyone who would listen that today would prove, once and for all, who belonged at the top of the shooting world. I tried to ignore it. My palms sweated inside my gloves as I adjusted the rifle strap. Ryan leaned close, his tone steady. Breathe. He's banking on you cracking under the weight of all these eyes. The match began. Derek exploded out of the gate. His shots were surgical, 10 after 10 after 10. He didn't just shoot well, he performed, stepping back after each bullseye with a smirk, playing to the gallery. Applause echoed. His confidence bled into arrogance, and the crowd lapped it up. I, on the other hand, stumbled through the early rounds. The weapon felt different, heavier somehow, the trigger sluggish, like it wasn't mine. Each pull felt unfamiliar, off rhythm. My grouping spread wider than I'd ever seen in practice. I caught Derek watching me with a glint in his eye that chilled me. That's when it clicked. He'd tampered. The realization hit hard, almost derailing me completely. Derek wasn't just trying to beat me, he was trying to humiliate me in front of everyone, to prove that whatever resurgence I'd shown in practice was a fluke. The whispers from his corner were already starting. Ryan's voice cut through my panic. He's underestimating you. That's your weapon. Trust yourself, not the gear. I closed my eyes for a beat, replaying Sam's old mantra from the days when shooting was still joy, not war. Tune out the noise. It's just you and the target. Nothing else matters. When I opened my eyes, the world steadied. I adjusted, recalibrating my stance and grip. Instead of fighting the weapon's flaws, I absorbed them, compensated for the sluggish trigger, leaned into the weight. Slowly, painfully, my grouping began to tighten. Shot after shot inched closer to center. By the midway mark, the crowd was murmuring. Derek's lead wasn't insurmountable anymore. We battled through the middle rounds, his swagger dimming as my consistency rose. For every smirk he flashed, I answered with silence and a bullseye. By the time the final stage loomed, the scoreboard told a story no one expected. We were tied. The air grew heavy. Derek stepped up first, his jaw set. He knew he couldn't afford even a hint of weakness. His rifle cracked, each shot clean, precise. 1, 2, 3, near perfect. A flawless display, just shy of absolute perfection. The audience roared its approval. Then it was my turn. I walked to the line, heart hammering against my ribs. Every eye burned into my back. The rifle still felt wrong in my hands, foreign, like it didn't want to cooperate. My first shot went wide, too wide. Gasps scattered through the crowd. Derek's grin returned. I inhaled, studying. Sam's voice again, softer this time, like a thread keeping me upright. It's just you and the target. I tuned everything out, the smirks, the whispers, even the sabotage that still pulsed in the gun's mechanics. It was me, my breath, the target. The next shot cracked, dead center. A collective hush fell. I fired again. Center. Again. Center. By the last shot, the world had narrowed to a tunnel. I squeezed. The rifle bucked. Silence stretched as the monitor lit up, another bullseye. The crowd erupted. Derek's score, so sure, so unassailable, was shattered. My total edged him by a single point. His face drained of color, disbelief etched in every line. I had beaten him. Not just his skill, but his sabotage, his cruelty, his attempt to break me. And the silence that followed, before the applause roared back like thunder, was the sweetest victory I'd ever tasted. The sound of the final score still echoed in the hall when the applause began, not polite, not hesitant, but a tidal wave. People stood, clapping, shouting, even stamping their feet. For a moment, I stood frozen at the firing line, rifle slack in my hands, barely believing the numbers on the board. I had done it. Derek's face told the other half of the story. He stared at the scoreboard like it had betrayed him, like physics itself had turned traitor. The grin he'd worn all morning was gone. He turned, searching the crowd for allies, but all he found were narrowed eyes and whispered judgments. Ryan appeared at my side, steadying my arm before I even realized I was shaking. That, he whispered, wasn't just a win. That was a statement. The club's event coordinator, who had spent the past week dodging Derek's pressure, stepped forward reluctantly. His hands trembled as he raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice uneven, "the official winner, by 1 point, is Claire Whitman. My name," spoken aloud, carried over the loudspeakers. The crowd surged again, some moving closer to offer congratulations, others to simply catch a glimpse of the upset that would no doubt ripple through every social circle tied to this club. For years, Derek had lorded over this place like it was his personal kingdom. And in a single match, his crown had cracked. I should have been savoring the sweetness of victory, but then I caught sight of the weapon still in my hands, the weight, the sticky trigger. My gut twisted. The sabotage was undeniable, and yet, instead of breaking me, it had become the crucible that sharpened me. "Check the equipment," I said to the coordinator, loud enough for those nearby to hear. There was a pause, followed by hurried whispers. Officials moved in, collecting the rifles, inspecting them. Within minutes, one of them shot Derek a withering look. Tampered. Obvious tampering. Derek's complexion darkened. "That's ridiculous. You can't prove." But the official cut him off. "Save it." His voice was iron. "You'll be hearing from the board." For the first time, Derek looked small. I turned away before he could try to twist the narrative, before his excuses could stain the victory. My chest swelled with something larger than triumph. This wasn't just about beating Derek or hitting the bullseye. It was actually about reclaiming a piece of myself I thought I'd lost forever and about proving I wasn't broken. Ryan clapped my shoulder. "Today's yours. And no one can take that from you." He was right. It was about me. About the girl who once sat at a public range beside her father, who promised she'd never let fear own her. The prize money weighed in my thoughts, $15,000. I could have used it to buy breathing room, to patch the cracks in my own life. I knew where it belonged. Not in my pocket, but in my father's old program, the safety initiative he'd started for battered communities, the one he always said deserved a second chance to breathe. I walked out of that club, not as the woman Derek mocked, not as the underdog destined to fold, but as the one who had stood her ground and won. Outside the club, the air felt lighter, cleaner. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs. The sun was just dipping low, washing the sky in gold, and for the first time in years, I felt something steady, unshakable. And maybe, just maybe, I was back. So let me ask you, if you were standing in my shoes, would you have walked away from his challenge or pulled the trigger?